to another level. He's got that level, and I just got to tell you, I called him to remind him tonight. I said, Greg, you all set? He said, Ron, I thought it was next week. That's the kind of, you said, yeah, he pulled that on me. But Greg is, as we all know, we've seen many of his works. He's won in some of our shows. He has won a ton. And what we really want to find out, in really the title of his presentation, is really what's behind the artist. What's behind that person?
His wife.
You know, Greg. Maybe we should have some testimonials. Those of you who are family, we verify any story he tells. But it's really nice to have you. And make sure that all of you take advantage of the refreshments and stay as long as you want and have some nice fellowship. I've got some sheets I'll sit around for all of you to sign up. So let's take a minute and let's give Greg Jones a big hand. Way to go, Greg.
I feel like I just won an Academy Award. So I'm going to thank all the help I've had. Thank my beautiful wife, Janet, for her love and support. I'll thank Kelly, my daughter, in the back. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to explain my art. I apologize that I will need to do so much reading, but I just don't speak clearly in front of groups. I might also apologize that I don't read very well either. I will eventually talk to you about art tonight, but the first thing I should talk about is me. I really don't think of myself as being particularly egotistical, but I am an introvert and I take life seriously, maybe too seriously. My art begins with me, so you need to know about me before you can have a full understanding of how it directly relates to my life. It has been my childhood experiences and beliefs that have been the strong motivational forces guiding me through my many years of creativity. For those of you who have trouble appreciating my art, I wish you could walk around in my shoes for a while, but since you can't, I'm going to do the next best thing and take you through some of my experiences and thoughts that might help you have some idea of what I'm about. I will tell my story, stopping only occasionally to show one of my paintings that is relevant to the story. Please hold any questions you might have until the end of the presentation, and you can look at the art up close at that time. My story begins in a small town in Virginia between Roanoke, Virginia and Greensboro, North Carolina in the late 1940s. The family home was situated near the center of town, but behind our house the woods were nearly uninterrupted all the way to the Blue Ridge Parkway. The town consisted of only 400 residents. Indeed, Ridgeway was a small town and still is. At about the time I was born, my mother experienced what she referred to as a religious conversion. She gave up many of her usual activities, including smoking and dancing. Both my parents would take my two sisters and me to the Methodist church right next door from our house 2 or 3 times a week, and occasionally to the Baptist church right across the street. Sometimes we would attend Oral Roberts revivals and other tent meetings that were nearby. In later years, we even sang in the Billy Graham Crusade Choir at Madison Square Gardens. At around 5 years of age, my early memories were of my brother coming home from the Korean War with a chess set. He taught me to play, and I got pretty good for my age. Also at this time, I went with my big sister Patricia to see the early version of The Lost World with those old jerky dinosaurs. It was the first of many sci-fi movies in the 50s that I came to enjoy intensely. These young years were often spent playing in the yard with bugs and plants and observing nature at work. I became increasingly interested in the woods and the weather. In the summertime, it seemed as though bad storms would strike, most every Sunday after church. One of these Sundays, we sat at our lunch table while a storm raged outside. Just as my mother walked to the front door to look, a large old locust tree fell across the front walk, hitting my tricycle and snapping the handlebar right off. This was only one of 10 or 12 trees that fell in our yard before we moved to Florida, which was when I was 11 years of age. You can turn the black painting around. I was in my first year of junior college in 1965 when this tricycle posed for our art class. It is interesting that I left out the handlebars, but I don't remember thinking anything about that Virginia storm. With church activities and religion all around, God became very important to me, and so did music. Both my parents were musical and sang solos at the Methodist Church. Singing naturally carried over to us children. After moving to Florida, both my sisters, Deborah and Patricia, went on to major in music at Florida Southern. My wife, Janet, also majored in music at FSC, as did our daughter, Kelly. And while I'm at it, our son, Drew, had a band when he was in college, but now he has the ink screen printing business in Dixieland with his friend. But back to the story. When I was perhaps 7 or 8 years old, my next door neighbor, who was also my cousin, purchased a large telescope. It was a 500 power, 8-inch reflector telescope that was motorized to follow stars and planets. I got to see wonderful sights, including Saturn, nebulas, and what looked like the polar cap of Mars. These were views that few other children my age were privileged to witness. My eyes and my imagination were opening to a very large world at a time when they had already opened to the small world of bugs and crawfish. So it was nature that captivated me in those years, although music and religion had their moments. My earliest or perhaps important memory of church was hearing in Sunday school that God is everywhere, even within us. I have never forgotten this. Of course, at times, a little devilishness shared the space with it. But most of the time, I felt close to God, and never more so than in the woods. I'm going to take a break from the story of Virginia and talk some about my art education. It is important to my story for you to be acquainted with how my art and first subject matter began and evolved, especially the subject of trees. So this is part of the Florida story. The family was living in Lakeland, but most every summer my prayers would be answered when we would visit the old home place in Virginia and the beautiful countryside. Then it would be back to Lakeland for another year of high school. My first Florida friend, Charles Parker, was going to take art, so I took it mostly because of him. Joe Clark was an excellent teacher who introduced the class to a variety of media, styles of art, and artists. My first oil painting was from a photograph on a magazine cover. And you can turn that right, that one. I didn't know it was a famous rock on the Pacific West Coast. It was called Morrow Rock. Changed it and made my rock extend above the horizon. After graduating from Lakeland High School in 1964, I attended Polk Junior College, now Polk State College, where I experienced an art teacher who broke all the rules. He went so far as to squirt paint through an electric fan onto a huge surface set up against the wall in our classroom, which, by the way, was in a chapel at the old Bartow Air Base. What we did seemed almost sacrilegious. He only lasted a couple of years at the college, but for me, I think he was just what I needed at the time, a good jolt to widen my art horizons. I knew this water would come in handy. Thanks to Polk Junior College, I felt prepared for the University of South Florida, where some of the professors were very intimidating. Their critiques often brought students to tears over their work. My first painting class wasn't so bad, but the assignment sounded grueling. We were to stretch and paint 40 canvases during the short trimester term, along with all the assignments from other classes. The canvases had to be about 3 feet in size. There seemed to be no time to think about a subject to paint. In a panic, I stretched canvases and worked to cover them with paint. I discovered places in the paint that seemed more interesting than other areas and worked to repeat those supposed accidents. This is how my spontaneous, natural approach to painting began. Even after graduating, when I began my mixed media work, it was still this intuitive, trial and error, spontaneous approach that I followed. And I do mean followed. It was as if God and my instincts were leading me, much like following my path in the Virginia woods, and it was therapeutic. Eventually at the university, I learned to paint some pretty good abstracts. I seldom saw the teacher except when the class would have a critique. Soon the abstracts evolved into abstract landscapes and trees. My trees were born subconsciously from the storms, the wind, the love, the religion, and the anger of those early years. The anger may have come from when the highway department tore up my woods behind our Virginia house, or from a girlfriend that had just broken up with me while I was a student at USF. I was hurting and went to the painting studio with deep, confused feelings. I completed a 3-foot oil painting in an hour and a half. This was definitely therapy for me. And you can turn the next painting.
Oh, wow.
This oil painting, titled There Stands a Tree, won Best of Show in the Lakeland Art Guild Annual Fall Show in 1967, and also won 3rd place out of 500 exhibitors in the Winter Park Sidewalk Festival in '68. Back then, Florida festivals attracted very well-respected judges. The judges at Winter Park that year were the director of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, and Elaine de Kooning, artist and international critic and wife of abstract expressionist Willem de Kooning, whom I admired. Those awards piqued my interest in actually making a little money with my art. As I painted some of those early tree paintings, I became aware that they were growing from the nature I experienced in Virginia, coupled with my emotions. The colors became brown and gray, even muddy. My mother used to call cloudy, cool days Ridgeway days because our town had a lot of drab days. Also, my college years were ending at this time, and I was experiencing some depression, not knowing what to do with my life. In one of those tree paintings, I used the word depression in the title, referring to a tropical storm. I will interrupt my train of thought here to say that before becoming so interested in art, I had considered meteorology, the science of weather, as a vocation, but my math skills were just not that good, and I didn't really care for math. Art was what I did best. Despite depression, my tree paintings with mountains in the background seemed to progress at an unconscious level. My emotions welled up inside, and I simply painted what I felt. In 1968 and '69, what came out of those feelings were dark Virginia landscapes. You can turn the next one around. This is an oil painting from 1968, and it belongs to my sister Deborah. These landscapes were painted on canvases that I stretched onto plywood that had been cut in circles. Why circles? I later asked myself. Perhaps emotions and intellect were coming together as I worked. The intensity of the Virginia storms, which I had taken to heart, and now my understanding of depression and my own inner states of mind were joining forces. One connection I soon made was that one of these round paintings in particular, which is this one, Patient Trees, reflected the nature that I was a part of. The trees, of course, the muddy paint, which is earthy, and then the round shape definitely related the painting to planet Earth. The thick paint, like the mud I played in as a child, I related to the mountainous topography of Virginia. I titled it Patient Trees, and it actually helped me to have more patience in my life. Perhaps the point here is that I believed in God and His creation, and as a part of it, I would learn and grow from how I expressed it in art. Sometimes my friend Charles Parker and I would line up the landscapes to see the changes in them. Eventually, after graduating from USF, the mountains in the backgrounds of the paintings became distorted, the color intensified, and the foliage in the trees broke up into smaller masses. Somewhere in my mind or subconscious, the environment of the tropical Florida was replacing the Virginia environment. On canvas, it wasn't me that was in control. I seemed to be a little out of control. In Trees 1970, the Blue Ridge Mountains in the background first showed signs of erupting into a volcano. Several volcanoes followed, however, most were not worthy of saving. You turn we've got them out of order. Don't turn the next one.
70?
Skip to the largest one.
This one. Okay.
This is Trees 1970. Often I would paint over work that I didn't like. Also, I would question why I repeated the same subjects. During the progression of painting volcanoes, the trees were reduced to ribbons. Actually, I created my first mixed media painting out of some of those volcanoes. But at the same time, I was accumulating other objects of a different sort that were attractive to me, often from hardware stores. I bought them, I didn't steal them. It was odd buying these objects without knowing what I would do with them. In one of these mixed media paintings, which no longer exists, I made a chessboard and arranged small pieces of my destroyed landscape paintings in some of the blue squares, with some found objects such as a key ring or magnet in some of the black squares. Later, I understood that this was a transitional piece from my paintings to the mixed media work that was to come. Perhaps the volcano was the means for allowing the subconscious ideas to become conscious. In late 1970, I realized that the objects and materials that I had begun to collect and assemble were all blue, white, clear, or reflected. They seemed to relate to the sky. I had begun to use paneling sprayed with white or blue, clear plastic tubing, and thin sheet metal. Clampboard with blue canvas was the first of my sky and air-related assemblages. The way I came to explain briefly what had been going on with my art during these years is as follows. First, metaphorically, I followed my path through the woods with paintings of landscapes and trees and learning about the earth. Second, the path led me, still metaphorically, to the highest mountain visible from behind our Virginia home, with a fire tower on top. And third, my imagination continued on by exaggerating the mountain into a volcano, which like an arrow pointed to the sky. Symbolically, the volcano then blew away the landscape and all the thick paint and left me with a clean slate. In my mind, it was like erasing a chalkboard. I gave up oil painting on canvas and began spray painting on smooth masonite, paneling, and plexiglass, as well as using the 3D objects that I had collected. The newly found sense of freedom I felt resulted in assembled works in mostly blue and white over a period of about 6 years, from 1970 to 1976. Prior to this time, my art had depicted my development in logical order. Even though subjects were abstracted, they were larger when close to the viewer and smaller when further away. After the volcanoes, I felt a closeness to the sky and to mountaintop experiences, especially in regard to my art. Time, space, and stillness prevailed in the work. No longer in my work did I feel like I had to use paint or had to arrange subjects in a natural order. I had been led to sky and space where nature begins to follow different rules. Now you can go back to the one next to the round painting and turn it. Originally there were sheets of aluminum where the screen wire is now. Actually the aluminum is still there. I just put the screen wire over top of the aluminum. I did that a couple of years later. So the aluminum was getting scratched up and I didn't like the way it looked. In clapboard and blue canvas, the canvas becomes one of the objects in the assemblage. This sky and air and water related work won Best to Show in the Lakeland Art Guild Fall Show in 1971 and first place at both the Osceola Art Festival in Kissimmee and the Sunshine Art Festival in Winter Haven, which used to be held no longer in existence. That was in 1971. Excuse me for a minute. I would be remiss if the picture I tried to paint for you with my words didn't include some surreal events that stand out in my mind from years past. They have definitely influenced this path I have taken with my art. I'm returning now to the Virginia story and the following events. I'm taking you back to our Virginia home on a Saturday night in 1956 or 57. Often I would take the front walk down the hill to my favorite old oak tree to watch the water running by the side of the road. When it rained, a large mud puddle formed in the same spot year after year, and it would last for days. It was a favorite place where I played in the mud. This night, as I watched the water and heard the dripping from the trees, a light appeared over the mud puddle several yards away, which momentarily petrified me. I later described it as a target on edge with bands of color. It sat still, then slowly moved behind the oak tree and zipped off between our house and the church. I hollered all the way up our long walkway to the front door, where I was consoled by my family. 2 weeks later, I had a similar encounter in the woods with a friend in the daylight. The light was in the open doorway of our tobacco barn, 30 or 40 yards away from us. Whatever I saw, the experiences continued to influence my serious view of life. Another event I found important to my art occurred in my 4th grade classroom. The class was preparing for a test. While the papers were being passed around, I was looking out the window, as young dreamers often do. I noticed a large cardboard box high up in the clear blue sky. The pencil sharpener was by the open windows, so I took my pencil with me to get a better look. The box was spinning. I knew to look down at the ground where the dirt had begun to turn. As I watched, the sand and debris from the dry baseball field spun its way all the way up to meet the box. I was amazed, but the story didn't end here. The funnel of dirt came directly toward our room. Dirt and papers went everywhere. So much for the test. What a joy for me and my classmates. Cypress box is the next painting. That one's a little heavier, so be careful. I'm just showing this one at this time because it's still in the sequence of when I painted. All of the paintings are in the order in which they were done. It's titled Cypress Box, and it's from 1973. And it also won some awards in the Art Guild at that time. It was 1957 when I was 11 that our family moved to Lakeland. I did not realize until much later how I was affected by the move. Charles Parker had become my best friend, but I spent a lot of time thinking about going back to Virginia and visiting my friend Sonny Moore, who's with us tonight. When winter came, I prayed a lot for snow. I would watch the sky and the weather on TV and my thermometer. Every time it got chilly, I prayed. And do you believe it snowed that winter? One morning in January of 1958, after praying for months, I took the garbage out before going to school. I had on my black overcoat and noticed tiny specks on it. The temperature was 47 degrees. I knew it couldn't stick to the ground, but I was ecstatic. When I got to Lake Morton Elementary School, which was where the public library is now, my teacher gave the class time to go out and play in it. The flakes had gotten very large by then and lasted for 5 hours. Later I was told that it had not snowed in Tampa or Orlando, only in Lakeland. From my early paintings to the mixed media paintings I do today, it is the wonder of it all, the depths of our individual beings, our creativity, and our learning that I find beautiful. Sure, sunsets are beautiful, people are beautiful, nature is beautiful, but that is God's creation. His work is more than astounding, but there is also beauty in discovery, growth, and in learning and expressing these things in art. I think with God's help, that is what I have been doing. I may not have much more growth left in me. In fact, I have become rather content with cans, bottles, and boxes of materials like screen wire, plastic, wood, and metal. But I am still learning, although once in a while I will paint trees and landscapes mostly for fun. By the way, it was the trees being whipped about by the wind that led to my paintings of dancing chairs and other furniture made of wood in the 1980s and 90s. What artists see in their own work is often totally different from what other people see, and I understand that. I probably read too much into my work, but I hope hearing my perspective helps with your appreciation of it. I don't know how many of you saw my show at the museum last year. Some of my writing about the work was displayed there, and now that you have taken the journey with me from paintings to mixed media, I will conclude with 2 of those mixed media works and 2 of my writings from that exhibit. You can turn the smaller painting.
You got that one.
It's actually a mixed media one. This work from 1980 was the first of many of my cans and buckets through the years, and it won many awards. Please pardon the dirty 36-year-old white mat. Okay, this is from the museum show. Many years ago, I found a small piece of metal and saved it. It had a nice, dark, subtle texture. Eventually, I combined it with a used air conditioner filter. They both had quiet, soft textures. The piece of metal was slightly bent, and I pressed it gently into the air filter. The piece of wire was perfect for a handle. I titled the assemblage Paint Pail. This was the first of many artworks of mine that involved ashen cans and bottles. After completing a couple of them, I asked myself why cans and bottles. Then I remembered a ritual from my childhood. Living in a rural area of Virginia until I was 11, it was my responsibility to take out all the garbage and trash to the large Stonehenge-like rock fireplace behind the house and burn it. It was largely the blackened cans and bottles that I would fish out of the settling ashes to haul down the hill to the dump. My subconscious connection with cans and bottles had suddenly become a conscious connection. It gave me an immediate sense of awe that these mundane objects had come back to me from the purifying fire in that old fireplace of my childhood. And one comment, since I wrote that, I wrote another paragraph. The simple can that you might find in the trash or run over in the street is one of my favorite subjects. I have told you where the cans probably originated, but not what they mean to me. They are perhaps personifications of all that is deemed worthless. The idea of taking something found, like the smashed can, and giving it worth is a miracle, like my first winter in Lakeland when it snowed. For me, it brings to mind all the impossibilities in this world that become possible, and all the insignificances that become significant. The subjects of the cans and bottles, along with the other throwaway materials that I use, merge into a work of art that expresses my philosophy of respecting God's creation. In essence, it expresses who I am and what I believe about our existence. And you can turn the last piece there at the end. This is in memory of Charles. In April of 2003, I discovered my lifelong friend dead in his home after a lengthy illness. Our years together had often been spent just sitting and talking in depth about life. About a year after Charles Parker's death, I was in my studio following my usual routine of digging through my collection of items to begin a new mixed media painting. The little chair that I had painted and framed much earlier spoke to me from among the many objects. It was nice like it was, I thought, but not quite complete. I tried combining it with other items until some old silverware from the Goodwill store caught my eye. I liked the way the knife, fork, and spoon made the special little framed chair look like a square plate. The arrangement continued to evolve. The composition needed something horizontal across the bottom. It was at this point that I began to see my work as relating to my friend Charles. Having spent much of my life in church, I recognized the similarity of the arrangement to the altar. The horizontal shape was like the communion table. The silverware on end was like the candles, and the framed chair corresponded to the cross on the altar. A friend thought the horizontal piece of wood with the reflection of the chair draped over it reminded her of a casket. The work of art gave me a sense of closure. In memory of Charles expresses my deep connection, a communion with Charles, and gives some insight into my creative process. And one last comment. After Charles died, I reconnected with my Virginia friend Sonny Moore. I invited him to Florida, introduced him to Joanna Parker, who is Charles Parker's wife, and they are now married and here tonight, all the way from the other side of Lake Hollingsworth. And I'm open to a few questions. I don't know how much time you have. But
We got a couple hours. Questions?
just so you know, I did all this not just for tonight. Wanted to do it for a long time, just to have it and maybe pass down to my grandchildren or something. Sonny has a story that he could tell if he's up to it. If he doesn't want to do it now, he can do it later.
Come on, Sonny, let's hear it.
The one about the BB gun.
Well, I think the term legally when the time frame for being criminally prosecuted.
Statute of limitations.
Greg mentioned, his front yard, which was long with, these slate blocks that we walked down to the road, referencing the tree, and there was a hedge that went across the front. And this was a narrow piece of land that from the end of the sidewalk to the street, maybe 20 feet, was barely large enough to pull a car in and park. But during that time frame, there were no stop signs in Ridgeway, and only recently did they decide to put up a stoplight. But before the bypass at the back of Gregory A, there was a time when Greg and I both got BB guns for Christmas. So being the playful fellows that we were, when the big trucks would roll by in front of Greg's home. Now these were, pretty big targets. So, but we thought we were really doing something when we could shoot the back end of that trailer on that truck as it rode by. I think Greg one time did shoot through the window. That was the truck, but he keeps saying that was me. I didn't. But we had a lot of good times growing up in Virginia. Special place it still is. Greg goes back to his occasionally to a place that I have up there. And we visit his old home place.
And Sonny and Joe both have a huge collection of my artwork.
Very proud. Spread out all over. We're glad to have it. Yeah, come on to Virginia. Good guy. No, that way. I live next to a lake in Virginia too. I understand. Shorter drive.
Anybody want to ask a question?
What's your studio look like?
A mess.
Your wife answered, I'm sure you didn't mean to say that.
It's
Mess?
not something,
Creative mess.
it's more of a storage building. I've filled it so full of stuff that I now do most of my work out in front of the studio.
Some of you are laughing, I've seen yours.
That's what we just said, we're not laughing at
Okay. More questions? This is your time to try to stump him. Hold back here.
This isn't exactly a question, but Greg mentioned being angry about that road that went through the property. Greg is usually quite mild-mannered, as sweet as a big brother could possibly be. But when that road was marked out with stakes and strings, of course I was a little bitty girl, I didn't know any better. We went down there and pulled up all the surveyor stakes and threw them as far as we could. I was hoping the road would be moved over. I don't know what we
We were a little mischievous.
Think?
Mischievous at times.
Someone else over here, who was it? Another hand, that's all? Change your mind? Okay. Over.
Greg, just kind of a group question. You said your approach to creating is more intuitive and can't think of the other word, spontaneous. And then when I look at your work and toward the last piece that you did, I see a lot of academic elements in your work. What kind of balance do you have between the two? Or do you?
Well, it wasn't planned ahead of time. I'll tell you that. It was spontaneous, and as far as trial and error, far as the paintings go, you know, it's obvious that they're pretty spontaneous. The only piece up there that, well, actually two pieces that I was looking at something when I did it, and that was the tricycle and the very first painting I did. Nancy, you're looking at me like you have a question. Yes. Do you want to ask me something?
Keep being put on the spot here. Well, I've known Greg for years, and I really, really do admire his work because it's so original. And to me, I think as he feels, art comes from you. You are a part of that work. And I think the presentation is wonderful because it does speak of you, Greg. I mean, it's definitely you, your life, your way. And,
I did it my way. Well, thank you, Nancy. That's a nice comment.
I don't say that to many people. I mean, I don't say I really, really love your work to many people, so it's a compliment.
And I don't buy that many artists' work, but I proudly own 2 of Greg's pieces. And would hope to own more.
Let's give Greg a great.